Hey, boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, creatures of all ages. I hope everybody's well at your place. Hopefully this pandemic is, going to be going away sometime very soon. I hope. Anyway, I'm working on a project right now that will assist another person in the molding game. I've been watching Windy Hill Foundry. This is a guy that obviously he learned a lot of this techniques, and he's mainly working with iron. Something I would like to have, but he's got the equipment to pour iron. Okay, and when he rams up his molds, he keeps them in wooden flasks rather than removable flasks and putting jackets over them. And he's been putting these round discs that look like they're made out of iron on them to act as mold weights. Well, they're not as good as he could have. In other words, they're not as you put one mold weight on there and then you put another mold weight on there, and they're small enough that you lean it on it to keep it on the sand. You'll see it if you go to Windy Hill Foundry, and you'll see how he does it. Anyway, in the Navy, we had these mold weights that were almost exclusively made to be used on the 12 by 12 flasks, the 12 inch by 12 inch flasks. Okay, and they worked excellently. The design was excellent. I don't remember ever seeing anybody improving on the design. So I wanted to make a pattern for Windy Hill Foundry and send it to him and see if he can go ahead and take some spare time and make himself up some better mold weights. Now, the mold weight, for those of you who don't already know what that means, is that when you pour, let me put this down a little bit. When you pour your castings, okay, you're normally in a two-part mold. The drag is the bottom, the cope is the top. Okay, when you pour metal into it, it goes down and hits the bottom, and you got hydrostatic pressure that wants to try and make them lift up, the top lift, and the molten metal pour out, right? Which is very bad. Number one, it ruins your casting most of the time, and number two, that really hot metal is flowing places where it shouldn't be, and you just might start a fire in your foundry. Okay, so you got to keep those, when you're pouring your molds, you got to keep them either clamped or have enough weight on top so that the top doesn't lift via the hydrostatic pressure being exerted inside the mold cavity. Okay, I'm going to show you the design. Now, keep in mind, I didn't use any. I did this all by hand. Okay, and so it's really not that best looking, but it's basically you can see the concept behind it. All right, let me get this, and I'll show you. All right, here is the base. You're looking at it from the top. Okay, you're basically going to have. This is a void in here. This is solid metal in here. Okay. Now the holes, when you make your pattern, the holes, when you depending on how you're going to do it, I'm going to use a hole saw, are 4 inches in diameter. You have one in the middle. You have one on this side, or this corner, this corner, this corner, and this corner. Holes are 4 inches, right? Well, the whole thing is 12 inches wide by 12 inches tall. Now you can modify that part like I did to make it more, make it work in your foundry the best. If you all the time you're using 12 by 16 flasks and you rarely use just 12 by 12 flasks, you can make this longer. Okay, this is a void, as I said before. Okay, now here's before I did all the cutting. For 4-inch holes and a 4-inch hole in the middle. Now once you cut those, you're going to have to do something over here. I'm going to erase that, give you a better idea of how it's got to be done. Okay, you have to join these voids, and what you're going to wind up having is what looks like a 4-leaf clover. Okay, now the advantage of this is if you've got your sprue in any of the corners of the flask, you can take one of these corner holes and put it over the sprue, and it'll act as a barrier so that it doesn't flow all over the place, and it'll maintain that spot. You'll know just to pour into this void. Okay. The reason why I say that is sometimes you're going to be away from out at the edge, and this is going to be, by the way, 12 by 12 by 2 inches thick. Okay. So once you get these holes cut, then you just merge the voids so that even if you had you had a strange flask setup, you can't always have your down sprues in the corners or in the direct middle. You're gonna have to put them where they really need to go, and so you have holes all around here. You could put your sprue anywhere in this void. Okay, now that's the bottom view. The bottom view, you can see where handles are made for this. Side view, well, basically all you're doing is you're just making a cutout in the middle of the side of each side, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so that no matter how you grab it, you'll be able to have one hand in here and one hand in here and picking it up. Now all of our mold weights were made out of bronze. Okay, normally gunmetal bronze. That was the material that we had the most of, and it was basically the cheapest material. But the advantage of that is that it will be heavier. You don't need to make these things out of lead. You don't need that much exertion. But if you have these things made out of bronze, they're fairly heavy. They're probably 25 pounds or thereabouts if they're made out of bronze. I'm guessing. I don't recall ever weighing them, but as my memory goes, these are about 25 pounds, and it's plenty. You can stack the weights on top of each other if the mold is bigger. Okay, if you know that you got a lot more of the casting in the cope rather than the drag, so that you'll have a heck of a lot more hydrostatic pressure trying to force the flask apart. Well, you can stack these and make certain that doesn't happen. Okay, especially if you've kept you made your mold, you kept it in a flask like a steel flask or a wood flask. You can put these somewhere in here over the sprue where you pour the metal in, and you can possibly arrange it to where the edges of these mold weights are right on the edges, so that it doesn't put any undue pressure on the sand. If you have a large void inside that sand and you put this on top of it without that in mind, you might just crush your mold cavity, and that totally ruins your project. Anyway, so you see it from here. The holes are 4 inches. Once you drill the holes, you merge the two, and it depends on how far apart these go. Like the one I have out in the garage that I've just started, it has a smaller area on one and a larger area on another. So let's say this is 4-inch gap here. The one out in the garage is more of a 2-inch gap. I'll take you out there to see it. Now, don't forget, when you make this pattern, you don't forget you have to put that, the angle on it so that you can draw it out of your sand. Okay. Usually, well, this is the side view, top, bottom. So this would be in the drag. So you need to have. Let me move this to my other hand. Every one of these dimensions has to have the draft in it. Boy, I tell you, these fight me. Have to have the draft in it. Okay, now that I've shown you almost everything, I can start doing it. You get the draft kind of like that. All right, so that you would be able to pull that out, right? The dimensions in here the same, the dimensions for this the same. Now I'm not a pattern maker, so I just remember in the past that even the billet patterns, they didn't put any more than like 5 degrees draft on the billet patterns. That was plenty good to pull a long pattern out of the sand. Okay, so because I remember that, I just remember that the maximum I need to add draft in here on all these dimensions is 5 degrees. Okay, that's plenty good for almost any pattern. However, don't forget, I'm not a pattern maker, so any of you pattern makers out there, if you have better advice than what I'm giving, please put it in at the bottom of the description so that we can see. Now, if you have on hand material that's 2 inches thick and you can make a 12 by 12 block of wood out of this, that's great. Most of us, and including me, however, I had to take scrap that I have out of the house and glue it together and do some chopping here and there. And right now it's so hot in Florida that I have to do a little bit at a time. I can't handle the heat as good, being as old as I am right now. The heat just doesn't. You're not as strong against the heat as you used to be when you were younger. So I'm going to go ahead and take you out to the garage and show you what I have on hand right now. Okay, here we are. Now, I came out a long time ago and got, there was this piece I had in the scrap pile, and I had, this over there. So what I did is I went and, planed this side, planed this side, then planed the side of this to meet that, so that these were nice and flat, as flat as can possibly be, so that the glue, when you apply it and then you clamp it, it will make that joint hard, stronger than these joints all through the wood. Now, my this stuff I had for a long time, so I was kind of worried that it wasn't going to be nearly as strong as it could be. But it turns out that it's at least strong enough for me to work with this piece of wood. Okay, so here's some of the marks that I made on here, some of the drawings. Don't forget, this is going to be 2 inches when I get done. It's going to be 2 inches. The holes that you're going to drill are going to be 2 inches away from the edge. Going to be 1 in each corner and 1 in the middle. Now, as you can see, I hope you can see well. Let's see if this is even on. Yes, it's on. Okay, very good. Okay, here's the hole saw that I'm going to be using. I'll be hitting this first in the middle, this, this, and this. And so these will all be voids in here. Then I'll have to take my jigsaw and follow this around, because this wood will still be here. Okay, follow this around as good as I can. And you know, these are wider than this because this is going to be longer. These are wider than this, and you know, there's this portion is going to be the wood also. So you have void, 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 and inside here it's going to be voids. So it's going to look like a four leaf clover, basically. Now the sides I made. This is basically the shape that the edges are going to be, where your fingers reach in, okay, and you grip it and you lift the whole thing up with both hands, and then you place it where you need to have the where the sprue is going to be. Okay, so this is as far as I've gotten so far. When I make more progress, I'll go ahead and bring you back, and then you can see. As a matter of fact, once I get these cut, I'll bring you back so you can see what's left in here. Okay, I'll bring you back in a little while. Okay, I'm back. Now it's been a couple of days, and because of the heat in this godforsaken place, Florida. Now it's pretty. It's nice. It's nice looking. See. It's not, as a matter of fact, it reminds me a lot of the area in California that I grew up. Good news about California, even though it's like 110 degrees in the summertime, it's a dry heat. Out here, it can be 80 degrees, but it'll be a 90% humidity. Hot as blazes. Anyway, that's the only excuse I got for not doing this whole project as fast as I can. Now, I'll bring you up to snuff. It's been a couple of days since the last time I got on camera. And you'll remember me showing you this, where I had, you know, the holes are designated for when they get drilled in, and it was this, you know, the item was this thick. Well, the item being that thick, it's not 2 inches thick like it should be. Okay? That was only 1.5 inches thick right there. So what I did is I added a layer of plywood, and now it's a little bit, like 2.25 inch. Now, better thick than not, because if you're going to be using these as mold weights, you need as much weight as you possibly can that won't damage your mold. Okay, and as I said, our normal mold weights in the foundry, on the ships and, well, elsewhere, were 12 by 12. You know, this is 12 inches and that's 14 inches. 12 by 12. I made this a little bit longer because the guy that I'm going to be sending this to, I haven't seen him normally use the 12 by 12 flasks all the time. He usually, you know, he's got all these different projects come up, and he's half the time he's making his own wooden flasks to encompass the sand that is needed to do this. So what I'm going to do now, and I glued this on, okay, but I don't have the clamps and everything needed to be able to hold it up against it hard for it to grip. So what I did is I went and got a bunch of these screws, kind of like these, and just drilled them down and drew the wood to this wood. Now, while that was drying, I decided to go ahead and make the indentation where the fingers would go. See, if this is all metal with those holes in it and everything, and this gap in here, you want to pick it up with both hands and put one of these circles over the sprue where the metal's going to be poured. Okay, so now this can all be exactly what I wrote on the whiteboard in my my office. But one thing that you possibly could and probably should modify is the handles. Okay, I'm going to put you down just for a second. Let's see if I can. Heads. I hope I'm getting it pointed in. Okay, imagine that these holes are all done, and you have to pick this up and you have to set it on the thing. Well, you need to have something. You can't have this like this, you know. You can pick it up that way, but what happens when it comes time to lay it on the flask or on the mold? Okay, you don't want to have to put, and this is going to be slightly heavy, 20-30 pounds. You don't want to have to lay it on there and then drag your fingers out. Okay, you're going to screw up the sand up here. What happens if there's a very, very thin piece of sand right here to form part of your mold cavity, and you draw your fingers across it? You might crunch it down inside, and you've ruined your casting. So, on all four sides, you make an indentation where your fingers can go, and you can pick it up. Okay. So, but here's the thing. Now, if you're always in the habit of using gloves, you're probably going to want to make this indentation a little deeper. Okay. So that the leather of your gloves or the material of your gloves doesn't scrape along the top of the sand, right? You don't want to have any loose sand that can be blown down into the sprue and ruin your project. So that's what I did last night. Last night, I not only added extra thickness onto the casting, but after I secured all the plywood to the other pieces of wood, I went and made the handles on all four sides. Okay. Now, how I did this is I used one of these new type of handheld saws. Okay, they call it a multifunction power tool. Anyway, basically all it does is this portion of the blade goes side to side just a tiny bit, but very fast, and so it actually rubs through stuff, right? So I use this blade, okay, and this blade to make these lines and be able to pick this portion out like that. Okay, and when I was, you're plunge cutting really with this. What I did when I plunge cut, I made sure I didn't do a 90-degree here, because this has got to have some draft in it. So I did what looks like to me was 5 to 10 degrees, and I plunge cut all the way around. Okay, so there shouldn't be any backdraft, which means, to those of you who don't already know, if you have backdraft, that means this portion is sticking out more than this down here, and so you ram the sand around in it. The sand that goes into this little crack in here is just going to be torn off when you try and lift this up. You can't have any backdraft. So my next my next step is to go ahead and take all these screws out, and then there's some. Oh yeah, gotta cut the holes. Gotta cut the holes. I'll bring you back when the screws are out. Okay, got all the screws out, I believe. Yep. Nope. Got one more. One moment. Let me get this out. What I get for not double checking everything when I am off camera. Okay, well, that's the last one. Now, I thought that I had to do this next. Well, I don't. What I have to do next is I have to get the excess wood. You see how it's not straight up and down? not straight up and down. Okay, I got to get the excess wood off of that, and it's basically just cutting off maybe an eighth of an inch of material. Yeah. Anyway, so I was getting ready to do my 5 degrees of draft on the outside here that you got to have so that you can pull this out. And I noticed I had lips all over the place. I hadn't gone to the part of making this, you know, straight up and down, getting rid of the excess wood. So I'll go ahead and do that and bring you right back. Okie dokie. Now you got to have nothing but basically flat, you know, backdraft or draft rather, not backdraft on this here, because you're going to be, this whole thing is going to be down in the sand in the drag. Okay, so you don't want anything to fight it. So what I did is well, let's get safe here and unplug this. All right, now what I did is I went and evened up all the sides so that there wasn't any wood stick out on these like there was before. And then I set this at 5 degrees over here so that this blade was at an angle of 5 degrees. Well, let me tell you, sometimes I can be very, very drifty. There's more than one cut that I did backwards. Okay, so I fixed everything, and this is 90 degrees, and I think you can see how much it's going to be in the sand. If you can see my finger, maybe I should use where most of the light is. So you should be able to see the gap in there. If this was all the way up, touching this all the way up, it'd be at 90 degrees. But it'd be a heck of a lot more work to try and pull it out of the sand if you left it at 90. I mean, you could do it, but you'd have to wrap the baloney out of it to get it out. And then even then, you'd probably, part of the sand would probably be ripped anyways. So from the drag down, this is, when it comes to cutting and all that stuff, this is finished. I still got a bit more to do to dress it up some, but what I have left to do is some of these. Now let's see. Oh, well, I'm trying to save battery, so I'll go ahead and bring you back when I'm set up. Okay. Is it working? Yes, it's working. Alright. Now, I'll go ahead and put you there out of the way. That's a good thing when you draw your circles, that you put a spot, you know, you make an indentation where this guide drill bit is supposed to get you going. And yep, that lines up. Yeah. It's a hard piece of wood. Okay. Of course, the battery died out on me. But as I was saying, if you're working with one of these hole saws and this material is deeper than the saw can cut, because it stops here. See, it'll butt up against the material right here. That's the reason why this, the drill, the guide or the master drill, the guide is longer than that, so that when you've cut down as far as you can go, you can come in from the other side. This is going to make a hole on the other side. Okay. Make sure you're still. Let's see if I can cut this without breaking my wrist this time. Oh, dang it. I'm going to have to. Oh, it pulled out of here, so I'm going to have to tie this so I don't accidentally do that again. I thought I tripped the breaker at first. That's what happens sometimes when you're fighting the electrical, or rather the electric device that you're working with. There we go. Finally came through. Look how thick that is. That's going to be a thick piece of metal once that gets poured. Okay, so there's my first hole that I'm digging. And I got 1, 2, 3, 4 more to do. And I'm not going to have you sit here watching me do all of them and maybe breaking my hand off at the same time. Yeah, I got an idea that I'm going to do another way. And I'm not young enough to have nice, strong bones anymore. Okay, I'll be back in a little bit. Welcome back. Okay, I'll tell you what. This is rough to do in a drill motor. Okay, this big thing. If you don't have some good forearms and a strong grip, this is going to break your wrist. Okay, I suggest that if you're going to ever do anything with this, unless you're got good hands and good forearms, put this in a drill press. Okay, but don't put it in a drill press like my cheapo drill press, the one I got from Home Depot. No, not Home Depot, Harbor Freight. Home Depot probably would have lasted better. See, the one I got it's done not a bad job for me for all the years that I've had it. Okay, but you can tell quality when you got it. And this one, the very first time I brought this down to the wood, I thought I busted this shaft here. When it really, in truth, all it did is just break it loose from the taper that's in here. This is a tapered, gripper. I didn't know that before because I'd never taken it apart before. I thought that was like screwed on tight, wasn't going to get off. Man, when that thing hit, it went boom, and I thought, sure as heck, that was the last I was going to use this drill press. Now, not everything comes out of Harbor Freight is bad. There's some bad things. Some things are very cheap. Things so cheap that you thought, how could they possibly sell this? That I've had for years. Okay? And anytime I needed something that did me a drill job, it did fine. So I'm not going to complain about stuff coming from Harbor Freight, at least not all of it. All right? So, this is now, this video is now a day or two, day. I did it yesterday. Today is the day after my drilling most of the holes in this mold weight. Okay, today I finished the last hole, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. Okay, really tough to do. All right, it was so tough that even after I glued this plywood onto the bottom of here to make up the thickness, there was things that got busted loose from all that wrenching and stuff. This piece of plywood got busted off. So did this one, and so did this little piece. So I had to get some quality glue, not wood glue, but quality glue, and the glue I got, of course, is the latest, greatest glue that's being made nowadays. It's this Gorilla Glue, and it's a spray adhesive. It works real fine so far. Nothing's fallen apart yet. I was going to use contact cement, but I wanted to see if how this would work. Okay, this is good stuff also, but I wanted to see if the Gorilla Glue would work. And it did exactly what the instructions say. It got tacky after about 1 minute. And so it says, once it's tacky, go ahead and put it on. Now if you want something that's really a good grip, you put glue on both sides. Okay? And I put glue on both sides. Yeah, I pressed them into place. It felt very solidly attaching itself. Okay? And so now what I'm going to need to do is, after I put all this together, what I need now to do is two things. One, I have to give these holes taper. These holes here, I got to taper them so that you can pull it out of the sand easy enough. And then after that's done, I'm going to try and get most of these sharp edges, just round them out with a well, and whatever it is I decide on. I got a new set of these bits, and to use on this project, and I've got all kinds of bits. So it'll depend on which one actually goes. All I'm going to do is round over those sharp edges, and so that it doesn't get, the sand roughed up and tear up when I try to when a person tries to lift this out of the sand. Okay, so everywhere in here, following this entire ledge, I've got to give it good taper. Okay, and then see, I did taper on all four sides here. When I dug these out, the taper was part. When I angled in to cut through the plywood, that was my taper I added to these. Okay, so basically, and I don't know if you can see it, but you should see some pretty good taper there. That's 5 degrees taper, according to my table saw. So it's just follow this outline here and put the taper in there. Take all these sharp edges here and round them out. Get a rounding router bit, and take the edge off of these. Even if it's a tiny little radius, even if it's like an 1/8 inch radius, it'll be better than leaving it like this. Much better. Okay. Then once I get this all done and I look it over real good and make sure that I haven't missed a lot, I'll go ahead and get some wood filler, fill in all these holes, try to smooth all these surfaces, and once that's done, I'll go ahead and paint it black so that all of the grains and everything will be filled in, and it should be a fairly decent pattern. I know it looks like crap now, but I used nothing but my scrap that I had around the house, and that's what happens. If you want to do this right, you can. Your best bet is to send away for some pine maybe, spruce maybe. It doesn't have to be anything very strong, because you're only going to make, if you're smart, you'll make one of them out of aluminum, and then you'll use that one as your master pattern from that point on. But you can use this to make as many as you need for your shop, and then you can throw this away or put this up on a shelf someplace in case you break a mold weight. I mean, it's not as thick as the mold weights we used. I think it's pretty close. I made this here at least 2 inches, and now it's down to what, 3/4 inches. But I won't be taking that much off when I start putting in the curvatures and all that. Anyway, if you're going to make this out of iron, which is what I expect the person I'm sending this to will do it, that person needs to put it through a heat treatment. Okay, you can just take it and heat it red hot, cover it over with sand, or if you heat it up red hot in an oven, just close your vent, the exhaust vent on the oven, and keep the door shut and let it cool down to room temperature overnight. Because you don't need to have this thing very tough, right? All you need is the weight. But if you leave it like it comes out of the mold, if it's cast iron, the first time you drop this is going to break. Okay? And it's pretty thick. It might last a bit, but I wouldn't test it. I wouldn't try it out. I would make certain that I annealed this and made it to where if it hits the ground, it might dent a little bit. That's it. Okay, so the next time I bring you into the little yield foundry here, I'll be working on another segment of this, and I'll be probably just be taking the 5 degrees of angle and putting it in there first. So that'll be what's next. Okay, well, I'll see you next time. Welcome back. Okay, this is the next day. I think you remember what the project looked like before today. I was going to have to put all the angles in so that it can project can come out of the sand. So what I have to do this, I have a drum sander. Okay, now here's the pivot point right here. Okay, so this will remain flat no matter what, and this is the part that you would lower, or I don't think you can raise it. No, you can't raise it. Here's the limiting factor right here. Now, my goal was to just maximum 5 degrees of draft. Okay, maximum. So what I did is I went and got my angle tool and set it up for 5 degrees. Okay, and so knowing that this is the pivot point right here, and this line would represent the pivot point, I went and lowered this. See, this locks it in place. I lowered this to where this was definitely at 5 degrees. Let's screwing it up. Anyway, so once I got that set to 5 degrees using my angle protractor, I guess you'd call it, I went and marked it on this guide. Then I took the whole guide out. There's only one metal screw in the bottom here holding this. And then I, just like these have notches in them for this to seat itself for that particular degree. See, like you won't be able to see this because it's black on black, but we have 15 degrees, 30 degrees, and 45 degrees already. That's 45, 30, and 15. And there's, oh, that would be, what is it, between 15, or maybe it's 20, maybe it's 17, something like that. Anyway, let me see, just for curiosity's sake. That's 15 right there. That's between 15 and 30. And here's my angle. Right there. And that says it's, what, 23 degrees? Yeah, it says 23 degrees right there. So if some projects are 23 degrees, you got a space right there, okay? So anyway, once I marked this guide, I took it off, I made a notch at the 5 degree line, and then set this like I had it. That's 5 degrees. Then I went all around the inside of the pattern. All around the inside of the pattern, and now that's all 5 degrees. Okay, well, it's 5 degrees this way, because you know this is going to be like this would be on the molding board, and the first part that you're going to ram up is the this would be on the molding board. You put the drag in there, you ram it up, you turn it over. This is going to be full of sand right in here. That's all going to be full of sand right in there. This will be like a green sand core almost to make this indentation all the way around. Then once you ram up the cope and you run you do the runner and the end gates, you can take the drag and set it aside, cope and set it aside, and then you take this and you wrap it real good all the way around. Then it should be able to come out fairly easily. Okay. If it doesn't, then a little more work needs to be done to it. Anyway, I still have a little bit of sanding to do, because I put in some wood putty where there was some dips and holes and such. And so that's what I'm going to do. Now, after I sand it down like it should be, I'm going to paint it. Okay, sanding it down should be the last part before painting, filling in all the cracks and crevices that you can find. But the only reason why you really paint anything when it comes to being on a pattern is because you want all that paint to fill in all those grooves. You want to try and make all the surfaces on this pattern as smooth as possible. Okay, which would also help be able to draw it out of the sand that much easier. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put this away and use my orbital sander to take care of some of these bits of pattern wood, liquid wood, and then I'm going to start painting it. And I'll bring you back when I do that. Okay, all the rest of it's been done. All the little bits that had to get done before I paint it has been done, and it's been painted. Painted it last night, and let it cure. And so here's basically the shape of the mold weight. This outside edge is supposed to just about lay on top of the sand, or on top of the sand or the flask, to keep the two pieces from coming apart. You pour into one of these 5 circles. Okay, so when you pick this up, you place one of the circles over the sprue or the pouring basin, and have the most of this lay on probably the edges of the flask or the sand, depending on how big the mold is. Okay, now this isn't exactly the way it was on the mold weights that I had on almost every ship that I was on. They had the same type of weight. Okay, so it was a tried and true design. It worked very well in almost any application that we needed it to be on top of the molds. It worked very well. Now, any of you who make this wooden one, and if you make a lot of molds, like 5-10 molds, and you set it out on deck and pour them along the line, I suggest you don't use this to make all of the mold weights. Wood doesn't last as long as unless you were to make it out of a hardwood like oak, but that would be an awful lot of waste. That would be a lot of money to spend, and a lot of time to overcome the hardness of the wood. Making one of these out of pine is just fine. This was a kind of a pain, because I had to put it together bit by bit by gluing pieces together and all that, and it's not as neat looking as a pattern maker would make it. Okay, they not only had the expertise and the talent to work with wood better than I, but they also had all the equipment required to make a better pattern. And here's the by the way, here's the bottom half of it right there. The reason why bottom half isn't like the top half is because here are the places where you'd put your hands if you wanted to pick it up. Okay, these aren't they're not 50 pounds or better. They're probably maybe 30 pounds or so if you make them out of bronze. Okay, the person that I'm sending this to is probably not going to make it out of bronze, although I do. The bronze is much heavier. It's a good, almost 50% heavier than iron. All right. Oh, as I was about to say before, if you're going to make a bunch of these, take this wooden one and make an aluminum master pattern. You can use the aluminum, you can ram up the aluminum master pattern many more times without having much degradation of the forms. Here, all you have to do is hit with the rammer one time, and you can crack that off, and then you kind of mess up the size. But make it out first. Take the wooden pattern that you make an aluminum master pattern. Then, depending on what it is you use all the time. I mean, like the person I'm sending this to is mostly uses the iron. Okay, he does a lot of iron. I don't recall seeing him do much of any bronze. Can't recall. But I mean, he's got the equipment to do it, so no big deal. He could, but he's probably going to, and if he's smart, he'll make one out of aluminum, so he can ram it up over and over again. But if he doesn't, I mean, he can make what, at most 10 out of these, depending on how easy he does the ramming, and then he would have probably all he would need. If you're going to be you're going to have a foundry that does mostly brass and bronze, make that out of bronze. You're going to be taking advantage of the added weight, and you won't have to put as many mold weights on the mold to keep them together. Okay, so this is the end of this little lesson. And well, the way things are going with YouTube, just about the only thing you can do to help me is to just go ahead and give a thumbs up if you are wanting to do that. You can. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to please ask the questions. And if you have any complaints, please, complain. I take complaints as I take good things. I take it to heart. So if I'm doing something really bad wrong, like using English incorrectly, I'll make the adjustments if I believe it's worth the effort. Okay, so now that the weather is starting to cool down a little bit, it's now the beginning of September in 2020. I should be able to be coming out here and do a few other things. Okay, so keep your eyes open. Have a good time, and for those of you who were on the ships, Liberty Call.